Welcome back to the Mindful Haven, powered by Imperium Psychiatric Group, where we amplify healing, resilience, and stories that change hearts. Today, we're going behind the camera of Finding Nicole, the true story film about domestic violence survivor Nicole Beverly. Not only through the survivor's lens, but through the creative eyes of the people who brought her story to life. With me today are the film's director, Harley Wallen, along with actor Debra Lamb, and together we'll explore what it takes to tell a story that's both honest and healing, and how film can deepen the national conversation around trauma recovery, holistic mental health care, and domestic violence awareness, which are all core to what we do here at Imperium. Welcome, Harley and Debra. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited to hear a little bit more about your role and your involvement with the movie. I had the pleasure of interviewing some of your castmates last week and Beverly herself. So, very good with Nicole Beverly, rather. So excited to dive in with you guys today.
Me
So,
too. Thank you so much for having us.
absolutely. Thank you. So, Harley, I have a few questions just to start off with you. So,
Yeah.
directing Finding Nicole meant carrying the weight of a real person's trauma onto the screen. So, how did your experience and your artistic vision shape the tone of the film, especially given the need to approach trauma with empathy, which is something we deeply prioritize here at Imperium in our holistic mental health care?
Yeah, no, this was a very interesting journey from the very beginning. So, me and Nicole, I don't know how much she said, but we actually have a friend in common who unfortunately has since passed. But he's a lawyer who has helped me with a lot of things, and he knew obviously that we were making films, and he knew Nicole. She had conversation with Netflix about putting this out in the documentary form. I'm a stalker, I believe it's called,
Oh, wow.
and we had a conversation, or she had a conversation with him about making a film about it, and he said, "Let me connect you." So he connected me and Nicole, and we ended up sitting at a Starbucks, and we had a really good conversation. We talked for several hours, and she brought documentation along and everything else. And I didn't really say anything until the very end of our conversation, but I felt like this has probably always been meant to happen. I was a kid in a house of domestic violence growing up. We've had the cops over and all the things that you see. I've had half of the experience at least of what you see on the TV when you watch our film. So I instantly felt like it was my turn to say something. As a male, I was on the Swedish national team in two different martial arts. So I was a tough guy, and I could never stand fully up to my dad until I was an adult. This felt like it was a story that I've just been dying to tell, because I've been quiet literally my entire life, because that's what we do. We hide it, we sweep it under the rug, we pretend it's not there. We think that it's a shame on us for letting it happen when we didn't even really have the power at the time to do anything about it. So I think that made it possible for me to take on the project. After that, it became a big ordeal to deal with, having a real true life story and having Nicole herself on set with us. She was a part of the writing process. When we were casting, she was a part of the casting process. So I think that's how we really made it so that it felt good, was that we involved her in every step of the way, and we still are. All of our screenings that we're doing, we're all in this together, and we're all trying to create change. And I think that's what makes it such a strong story, is we're telling it from her perspective. The only thing that I feel like I contributed is I felt that it needed to have that reenactment feel to it, to give you that very realness. If you watched just the acting alone, it almost feels like you're a fly on the wall of seeing it actually happen. So that was the way we went after it, and that was kind of how we tackled the whole project. And I'm so grateful that Nicole was with us along the way to help guide all of us to steer the ship where it needed to go.
Absolutely. That's really fascinating to learn how everything came to be. And first of all, Nicole's amazing. I think that she's so strong and so open to not only writing this book and then taking it to film and being vulnerable and strong enough to have her real life play out on film. And I think it's an incredible combination that you've unfortunately had real life experience with this, but being able to take that onto film and having that genuine concern about it where you have that experience is even more impactful. And something I discussed last week with a few members, a few actors that were in Finding Nicole, was finding Nicole is so important because it is opening this conversation, and it's opening this conversation to those who have this trauma, who have this issue. Myself, I grew up in a household with some level of domestic violence, and a lot of people have, and it's something that is so common, but like you said, it goes not unspoken because there's shame, there's guilt. So for those that unfortunately have experienced things like this, it's opening that conversation. And for those who haven't had that, it's providing education so they can understand more about the complexities of it. So I think it's just great that that dynamic worked so well for you and Nicole to bring this to life, and everyone else involved as well. And I know you didn't just direct the film. We briefly talked about this earlier, but you also did step into the role of Officer Jones. So, what was it like for you embodying someone tasked with protecting survivors, especially knowing how often the system can really fall short in real life?
Oh yeah, no, it was a really interesting process. When we started this, I wanted to get the other perspective. So I interviewed a few police chiefs and some more officers to get their perspective. And I was really shocked when they said the only thing that we do more than domestic disputes is traffic tickets. And to me, that just sounds like an epidemic. And we just had an epidemic, and we were all doing all these things 6 feet apart, and masks, and vaccines, and you have to show, but we don't have to do anything for domestic violence. There's no checks and balances at all. So I felt like playing that police officer and dealing with it was definitely unfortunately, like we said earlier, my scene was cut by the director, so I'm gonna have to bring that up with him later. But that was it was a fun role with Debra, actually, which we had a great time making. So yeah, it was fun to play it, but it's a sensitive subject, and it's tough to play a police officer because when you look at it through their eyes, I've been in situations where, as a bouncer, you would have a guy hit a girl at the bar and you grab the guy to take him out, but the girlfriend at this point almost has Stockholm syndrome, so she attacks the people who tries to remove the person that's actually hurting her. So it is a very, very tricky situation. And it's the same thing for these officers. When they show up, a lot of the times the victim doesn't want to press charges, doesn't want them there, is worried that they're going to get in more trouble if they say or do something. So to have all those sensitivities as an officer, I think is very important so that you can tackle things properly. And you can't get jaded with all these situations because, it's like somebody said this a long time, and I love this, but they said, you can't have any bad days when you're an airplane pilot. You have to land the plane every time. And that's kind of how I look at policing. We start saying, well, there's going to be some bad apples or some rotten eggs. No, as a police officer, you can't afford to have a bad day. And we need to start treating and hiring people appropriately for that so they can handle the situation and not just escalate and cause more trauma.
Absolutely. It's definitely a lot of complexities and layers that are involved. And I know, Deborah, your character, Susan, is a figure of authority in the film as well. So, how do you think that viewers should relate to your character? And how does that reflection impact the need for trauma-informed care, something we focus on daily here at Imperium?
Yes, well, I play Nicole Beverly. Well, Nicole in the film is played by Katie Wallen, and, I'm her mother. So, of course, I'm concerned from the get-go, but, and I can relate to this because I was in the same, well, maybe not to the degree of in the film or in Nicole Beverly's real life, but I was also in a relationship that was like that, and just a lot of craziness. And my mother was very concerned about me. And you end up, when you're in that situation, it creeps up on you so slowly, bit by bit, with these narcissists, and then they gaslight you, and then you just think, you don't know what to think. You think everything's your fault, and you cover for the person, just like Harley said. I remember just making so many excuses for him and just trying to cover for him. And so in the film, of course, she's kind of doing that too, to a degree, until she has to, things escalate to the point where she, really has to get out of there. But, which of course, I'm there for her to support her in trying to get away from this person. And, unfortunately, everyone will have to watch the film to see it. I don't want to give any spoilers, but, it's very tricky to get away from these people sometimes. So, yes, I do play an authoritarian figure in Nicole's life, being her mother, but at the end of the day, the person that's the victim, people can try to help them. Tons of people can try to help them, but until they're ready to accept that help or to get help themselves and know that there is a serious problem, and a lot of times it's when it gets to the point of life and death, when they really, it's like, then they realize, it's like, I have to get out of here or I'm going to get killed. So sometimes and then unfortunately, a lot of times it's too late and these people don't escape in time. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's so pretty much took the thought out of my head because, like you said, you unfortunately were in that situation. I've been in similar situations, not to that degree, thankfully, but even as women too, we all know someone who's been through this, unfortunately, and men go through it too. But statistically, it's obviously more common with women. But like you said, when you deal with narcissists and it's little by little, you don't know the outcome. And that's something we talked about last week's episode as well, as you go through this and you don't even realize what's happening until it gets bad enough that you look back and reflect and it's like, wow, how did I get here? And the shame comes in then because you're embarrassed and you can't believe it got to this degree, and can it get worse? And it can always get worse. So it's so important to have this conversation, but sometimes it has to get really, really bad before it can get better. And that sometimes has to get really, really bad and before you even reach out to authorities and reach out to police officers and get law enforcement involved. And I know, Harley, you mentioned this earlier to me, that you actually interviewed a few police officers in preparation for your role and for filming. So how did that go about? And what do you think, how do you think rather interviewing those police officers helped? And in your opinion, how do you think the film found balance between showing the legal complexities and the survivor experience?
Well, so we definitely wanted to be true to Nicole's story. So the things that happened to her, that we played those things out between using police reports and her journals. We were able to figure out what we were going to use in the film and what it was going to do. But we wanted purposefully to tackle that the judicial system is very tricky, and to get out is not as easy as you think. We wanted to touch more on things. We talked about shelters and other things, but it became too much for one film. And we've talked about this, that, Nichole has, when we figured out what to write this script about, I had hundreds of pages of all this stuff to try to figure it out. But I think for the police officers, the trick is to know when is it spat on a misunderstanding and something went wrong, and what they really needed to do is to have a conversation with a therapist, or a friend, or a family member or something, because that does happen. I've seen that myself, with friends, that sometimes it's just combustible because the wrong time, wrong place, wrong people. And as an officer, you got to know somehow when that's it and when it's not the other. And I do not envy them their job. It's the same thing with pulling somebody over. You got to somehow have a sense for when there's a shotgun pointing at the door and when somebody's just going to hand you the license. And they live a very, very tough way to figure this out. And the domestic disputes definitely take their toll on them. And the law has now become better, at least in Michigan, where if anybody has put hands on the other person, automatically they go in overnight, which will diffuse the situation and avoid the problem, at least for the moment. And sometimes that's all you need to start working on getting out. Or sometimes it's all you need to wake up and realize that, hey, I got out of hand and I got to work on myself, to change. But yeah, I mean, there's so many layers to this, between the judicial system, the officers and their very, very impossible job, and then down to the shelters that are undermanned and underfunded, and sometimes a little bit dangerous too. And to send people in dire need to those types of places is very hard, where they get potentially taken advantage of all over again. And I don't envy any of the problems, but that's what I love about Nichole. She's actively out there with an agenda to change all this so that we can have better laws on the books. All the way up until this, or no, last year, the assailant would literally have your home address and information on the paperwork, so they could find you and harm you again. And that just became so that was not available to them. But all of these little things has to be tackled, and we do funny things here in the States. It's state by state, so there's not like an umbrella over the country with rules and laws that make sense. So each state gonna have to figure it out kind of on their own and find some kind of best practices. But yeah, it's stressful on them. You can tell when you talk to them that this is not something that they at all enjoy as a part of this.
Absolutely. And it is interesting to me, and I thought about this even prior to watching Finding Nichole or having this conversation with you or anyone on the cast, but it is interesting how it does differ from state to state. I'm based in New York City, and I do know that domestic violence is something that they definitely do not take lightly in New York, but it's still a huge bureaucratic system in which things fall through the cracks. It's overpopulated. They can only do so much. They take a while to show up. The follow-up is intense. I know in New York, with any DV case, it's automatically the state of New York against the perpetrator. But it is very interesting how it varies from state to state. And yeah, there is no anything fluid or anything concrete. So I think that also is probably a way that people can go from one state to another and kind of not get away with things, but make things even more complicated for DV cases as well.
Yeah, actually, in this case, I don't know if Nichole covered this, but he actually did move and he worked for the police, and he moved to a different jurisdiction that used different computers. So his first couple of things that happened where they used to be, they weren't in the system where they moved. And it was obviously strategic when he made that move, but it's just like, these are just crazy things that how do the police not have systems that speak to each other? That sounds crazy to me.
Absolutely. It definitely does. It sounds crazy. Even states close to each other. It's a very complex and complicated situation for sure. And as a director, and speaking about this, what message would you want men, especially those unfamiliar with mental health effects of abuse, to really take away from Finding Nicole?
I have said this almost my whole life, but I was fortunate enough to have a good mom that taught me to communicate, and talking your way through problems is a really, really good way to handle things. Talking to a therapist, or talking to somebody that you trust, or to you through your church. I think talking about your problems, the stigma is gone. We need to let go of these things, and we do need to understand that it's just like with anything else. If I said, hey, you need to go change the garbage disposal, you'll say, I don't know how to do that. And that's okay. We can be the same way when it comes to our mental health. We can be the same way when it comes to our capabilities. We can say, I got really upset. I was really jealous. I was really scared. I was nervous, and it came out in anger. And then you can say, how can I get help? Because I think ultimately, I think that's the big thing, that we as men, instead of bottling it all up and it all coming out as anger, if we just talk through things and we just communicate, we can find out, first of all, if this relationship is for us. When I look at somebody that is in a relationship, let's say that you're really, really insecure as a male, and you date or are with somebody who is gorgeous, and like you had my wife on last week. Katie is a social butterfly. If I was insecure, it would be a nightmare to deal with that, because she's a bubbly and friendly and everywhere, all over the place. And it could be, for somebody who is insecure, a really, really rough thing. And that could show up in really bad ways. But I think if you know yourself and you know that you have some issues with this, figure out yourself, and then figure out what you need out of a partner, so that you can find somebody that has the same values and morals and ways as you do, and talk about it. Talk. That's me. Talk about it.
Absolutely. I think that that's incredible. And that's why, again, this is so important, because it opens this conversation where you can identify ways to even help yourself. I know last week and the week before, when I actually spoke to Nichole, she mentioned some of the work that she's doing is going into high schools and having these conversations. And younger boys were realizing, hey, I identify with some of the things that you mentioned, and I don't want to do that. And it goes back to being able to talk things out and understanding and identifying these issues about, if I'm insecure and dating a super attractive woman, and knowing these potential trigger points, and really how you can eliminate the anger and really talk things out, because speaking through things is something that's already healing. So that's super important. Absolutely. And
I think everybody should be in therapy.
absolutely, mental health, it's something at Imperium we deal with quite often, these issues. So Debra, for you, as someone who has portrayed many different characters over the years, what made Finding Nicole stand out for you personally and professionally? And how do you see it impacting viewers who may be dealing with some unresolved trauma or isolation?
Well, I've known Harley and Katie for many years, and I've admired them as producers and filmmakers. And for a long time, I've been to a handful of their premieres for their earlier films. And the opportunity came up for me to play this role, and I was really excited about it. But and then, of course, while we were filming, it was obvious that this film was going to be very important. But after the film was done and it ran the film festival circuit last year, and I was lucky enough to be able to go to a couple of the film festivals.
Win some awards too.
We all did. Yes. I won two.
You did a couple of them.
I won 2 Best Supporting Actress awards, which was wonderful. Harley's won many. Katie has won a gazillion for her role, which she deserves. And so, but the responses from people seeing the film at these festivals, and of course I wasn't at all of them, I was at 2, but just the 2 that I was at, the response to the film was tremendous. Everybody who saw it was affected, and even people who didn't personally experience this type of abuse, they were very affected. Everybody found this film as a good film, a piece of artwork as a film, but also just so informative and just so eye-opening. And then, of course, at the end of the film, it has, some statistics and also numbers and things like that where you can get help. But now that the film, leading up to the premiere in LA, which unfortunately I couldn't be there, and then there were so many interviews. I was watching all the interviews of everybody, and, it's just all the interviewers were just bringing up how important a topic this is. And of course, Nicole Beverly is the spearhead of all the movement, and it comes from her. And, and then I'm so grateful to be a part of this film, because not only is it a really good film, I had a really good role, which was very nice, but it's an important film, and it's good. It's a good film, solid filmmaking, but it's getting an important word out there in the world. And this film in particular does it in a way where it's not sensationalized. I mean, it is based on Nicole's true story. The things that happen in the film did happen. So I'm just grateful to be a part of this film. And with your original question, what attracted me to this project? Well, of course, my personal experience. And when I got a chance to talk to Harley about it, and, of course, he's divulged that, he has his own personal experiences with abuse. And most of us do. So it is an epidemic. It's an epidemic.
Absolutely. It 1000% is. And all 3 of us live in completely different states, probably different walks of life, and so many differences. So for us to all sit here and have some degree of personal experience is a testament to how common it really is. And even last week, when I was connecting with members of your team and actors and everyone involved, they all have some level of experience. So it's really everyone has either went through something like that or knows someone who has. So it really is an epidemic all over.
I just want to add something real quick. Harley you are from Sweden,
wow.
right? You're from Sweden. I have a couple friends in Sweden, Helen and Jonas.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Yeah.
Jonas.
Yes.
And so I've had many conversations with them, and they say they're also advocates to help improve the laws there, because the domestic violence there is just rampant, and the laws, there's hardly any laws protecting the victims, whether they're male or female. And it's just horrible. I mean, you think things are bad here. Apparently, it's really bad there.
Well, in Sweden, the long-term laws are better, but the problem is the short-term. Like here, I know in Michigan, if you push somebody, you're gonna spend the night. And in Sweden, it's not quite that simple. If you can de-escalate, you can leave them together and go home again, which to me, it just crazy that you can allow somebody who has been physically abusive to another person to stay with them. It's one of them things again that it just doesn't make any sense. So yeah, it's not just an epidemic here, it's an epidemic everywhere around the globe from everybody I've talked to, not just in this country. And the laws are all not great for the victims. And not only that, but how are you going to have the money for that? It's not like, and then knowing how what they do is they usually isolate you and they usually remove assets from you. So that way you can't. There's a lot of work to be done for sure to get this right. But it begins and ends, like you said, with Nichole at high schools, talking to young women of understanding red flags, talking to young men and having them go, you know what? I relate to that. And now you can seek help when you're 15, 16 years old, maybe. And it's a lot easier. You haven't done anything bad yet. You have a clean slate. Maybe now you can go work on yourself and prevent it.
Absolutely. And that's something we touched on too about when and if you happen to get into one of these terrible situations, you always reflect, like, how did I get here? Like, I would have never thought I'd be here. No one ever sees themselves to get in to these experiences. So starting with such a young age demographic is so crucial, because as this can happen to anyone, grown women, educated women, anyone can easily get sucked into this depending on the situation. So giving young girls and young men those tips, that knowledge ahead of time. So if something like this does happen, you already have a little bit of understanding, a little bit of a way to self-reflect or look out for signs. So it's something that should be more widespread. And I think that Nicole Beverly is just so amazing to go and do that. And again, do everything she's doing for this cause and be able to put her life out there for everyone and take her pain and make it power. So I think that that's, just super, super important. And Harley, so here at Imperium, we design healing first mental health, from talk therapy to trauma-informed care. So we touched a little bit on this, but how do you think Finding Nichole aligns with not just being a story, but as a catalyst really for awareness and change?
I hope it's a bit of a mirror to society so that people can find themselves wherever they are. I think people have a hard time seeing themselves in a villain, but maybe a best friend to somebody can see it, and maybe there can be a nudge, maybe there can be a conversation, because I truly do believe in that. I believe that we have to start somewhere, and it has to start with communication, and it has to start man to man or woman to woman, but person to person. Because I think that's when we hear the messages, when it's your friend and he puts your arm around you and he says, "Hey man, I saw you grab your girl's arm and that looked painful, and I don't know if that's okay. I don't feel good about that." Like, are those conversations happening? Is somebody saying maybe you should talk to somebody about this? That's kind of what my worry is, and especially with men, because we were just brought up to just suck it up and keep going, and that's hard to be that guy and then talk to somebody when you have problems. And I think we have to redefine what a strong man is. I think a really strong man can ask for help. I think a really strong man can admit that he's wrong. I think a really strong man can do a lot of really good things by being vulnerable. And I think that's a lot of strength. Not posing and not bullying and being somebody who walks on other people or feels the need to control them, because that's a lot of what this is. It's power and control that shows up in ugly ways from people that feel out of control, and they're trying to somehow grab a hold of life and have some control over it, and that's how I think they end up there. So yeah, I think that's the way to start it, and where it leads, it's individual. Each person their own. Might be enough to have a conversation with your best friend, and maybe you look in the mirror after that. In my opinion, most people are gonna have to bang their head on the wall a few times to change, because change is hard. So that's why I always say that everybody should be in therapy, or at least have somebody that they can talk to about things so that they can process. Because I've noticed the difference between stuff in my head and talking out loud with another person. It's a big difference. Like when I hear the words out of my mouth, half of the time I know what's right and wrong myself. I just needed to say it to somebody to know it. And I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely. And so much of what goes into domestic violence is so much mental abuse. And I think a big part of going back to what you were saying is about changing the way we think about and talk about masculinity, and how it's so important to change the framework, because there's such a stigma. Well, there's a huge stigma around mental health, men or women, but specifically when it comes to men, and again, in different countries worldwide, like masculinity is, macho man, men don't cry, don't have feelings, we're going to be strong men. And that doesn't
Good
really
luck with that.
man. Yeah. Being a strong man, you are able to communicate. And I think that that's something that there's so much work to do on that as a society. But definitely starting this conversation can help attribute to that change. So I'm very glad to even be part of this conversation. And Finding Nichole, the movie, really hits so close to real life pain and resilience. So with that being said, Debra, I know you've portrayed a lot of complex characters over the years and your time in film, but with this role specifically, how did you approach it, knowing that with your own experience, but also knowing it could really impact a lot of survivors that are watching?
Yes. Well, my approach was just very organic because I knew Katie from before and I was friends with her already. And the opportunity to play her mother, she's playing Nichole, but I have, feelings for Katie. I'm very fond of her. And it was very, very easy for me to put myself in the role of her mother, of Katie's mother, playing Nichole. And then, of course, I did get an opportunity to meet Nicole Beverly's mother. I didn't get the opportunity to have a real deep conversation with her, but I did get to talk to her a little bit and, just get a feeling for, how she is. And that helped a lot. I think just my own maternal feelings for, I'm a maternal person anyway, and very, empathic. I'm an empath. So it was very easy for me to get in the role of, wanting to get my daughter out of this horrible situation. And the whole thing of just how I approached the role was really based on very real things, very real emotions, real experiences, like I said, a fondness, friendship with Katie, and of course Harley too. But so it was very easy to just slip into that role and take on that position of just wanting to protect this person, and the fear that something violent is going to happen, to my daughter. It was very easy to do, actually.
Yeah. Can I just jump in with one thing? I will say the chemistry on set was palpable. You felt that every day was like you were tingling almost, because it was so happening right then and there, and you could see it coming together, standing on the outside of it and just go, wow, like feels really real.
I can vouch for that too, because I was there every day while I was in Michigan. I was there for, I think, 2.5 weeks. And I was there every day, and I was there on days that I wasn't working, but I was there anyway. And there were so many days where Katie and Shamari had these heavy, heavy scenes, and woof, woof.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. As just someone who viewed it, but viewing it with a different, I guess, view in a way than just someone watching it, not knowing the context, but having the experience to connect with all of you and watching it. It felt so real. I'm sure it felt like that to all the viewers, but it was just it seemed so organic, and knowing everyone's story behind it and now even knowing more about it, I want to rewatch it. But it's so interesting to see how that all really gels together. And especially knowing, Deborah, that you were playing her mom, but you also have that experience. And even to go back to what you said about being empathic, I'm empathic as well. And like talking about narcissists, they gravitate towards empaths
Yeah.
all the time. And that's why, and survivors who witnessed domestic violence tend to often be empaths because they've been through this and they see it. They don't want anyone else to go through it. They always have that willingness and that drive in them to want to help, to want to make a change. And oftentimes that's what really allows them in a way to get sucked into these situations. Even with the know-how and the knowledge and the awareness, it can happen to anyone. So
It really can. I mean, I was a strong, independent woman. I was in my very, very early 30s, and this person just kind of got me at a very vulnerable time, and then I just got sucked in, and then because I am an empath, oh, his problems, I tried to get away, but what do you think?
same.
And then
There's no shame. I'm same. I hear
And then
you.
what you guys were talking about earlier about the shame, I think Harley was talking about that. Like 20 years later, 20 years after I had already been out of that, 20 years, almost 20 years after I had like completely been out of that relationship, I still had these moments of complete breakdowns over like, how did I do that? How did that happen? I wasted 9 years of my life. I mean, everything was destroyed out of my life. Everything was taken. All my money was taken. I couldn't even have a bank account because of that person. I mean, everything, my whole entire life was destroyed. And it's like, I, the shame and blame for myself, like, how did that happen to me? How did I let that happen?
And that residual anger is something that lingers, especially when, like, I'm a strong independent, I'm in my 30s, and that's why it's so important to let even like the younger youth know, because it really can happen to anyone. And when you feel like, how did I allow this to happen to me when I'm an adult and I'm set and all these different things? So it's really just a testament to how scary it can really be and how easily it can really affect you and really anyone. So it's good, whoever is listening to this that might be going through it, you're not alone. I think that's just super important to throw out there. And working, either directing or acting in Finding Nicole, there's such a responsibility, and there's such a way that you need to be both truthful and sensitive. So this is a question I have for both of you. How did working on Finding Nicole really shift your thinking around mental health, justice, and support systems? So I don't know if Harley, you want to go first, but I'd like to hear that from
Yeah, go ahead, Harley.
Because of how I grew up, I've always been aware, but I feel that Nichole really showed me how to stand tall. And this happened to me, but this doesn't define me. It's not who I am. This happened to me, just like a car accident can happen to me, or somebody might break in and take my stuff, or things happen to us. And I think that has helped me personally get out of the shame and everything else. So Nichole really helped me, because man, it was hard for me to even just say what I've went through, and it gets easier and easier every time I talk about it. And I've noticed that I have other friends now that talk to me and they tell me their stories, and they've never said anything about this before. A good friend of mine, Jerry, I work with him on films, and we've known each other for a decade. And recently, with this experience with finding Nichole being made and having these conversations, I found out that he grew up similar to me. And he'd never told me, I'd never told him. And that's what I find the beauty of this is when you can take the power away by talking about it, by being open, and by allowing it not to define you. And that's what I really have learned from this. And Nichole really helped me with that because she was so proud and she was so brave and she was so strong that I was like, wow, like I want to be more like that. I want to be I want to speak on this. We're actually right now we are in very early pre-production for another film on domestic violence called Killing Jenny. It's another story that is also told from domestic violence friend of Nichole that we're telling her story next.
Wow, that's super fascinating. I have to stay in the loop with that.
So this is gonna be a thing for us now. We're gonna speak out on this, and we're gonna talk about this, and we're gonna show the different ways they make it in and slide by, and how they get you, so that hopefully we can be a little bit more aware. And then when we talk about it, people will listen. And like I said, my friend Jerry never knew anything about it. He never knew anything about me, and now we both know. And now we speak a little bit more openly about these things.
That's what I love about this conversation, how it really does open up the floor to so many people. And I think I had this thought when you were saying about Nichole being so strong. She is super strong. And I think that that's a huge misconception, is that victims are weak and victims don't want to come forward, and victims do have this shame and this guilt, but the misconception that they're weak. Oh, how could you allow this? When in the reality of the situation is victims are so strong. Victims have to be so strong to come forward, to seek help, to seek guidance, to get authorities involved if it requires that. So I think that that's something that if anyone is listening that is going through this, it's not a form of weakness. If anything, it can make you even stronger and again turn that pain really into power and take your power back if you're struggling.
Yeah, we've had so many people reach out to both me and Nichole, and I'm sure most people on our cast and crew have heard it too. But a lot of people that have been in this situation, they feel validated by the film because they say, I feel seen, I feel heard in this film. And that to me is worth everything. That was when we started this journey. I asked her, I said, what's the most important thing for us to have at the end of this? Obviously, everybody's trying to get their money back and maybe make a few bucks on the film. So that's an obvious thing.
Debra, I'll ask you that too. So working on finding Nichole, was there anything that really shifted your thinking around mental health or justice and support systems at all?
Well, it brought my attention to everything that's lacking to protect the victims. It did bring my attention with everything that Nichole's been talking about through this whole process before the film was made. And then, during all last year when Nichole was in a lot of film festivals, and then of course all the interviews that she's been doing, and again all the interviews at the premiere that she spoke about everything and the subject, and then she has the called Enough initiative, right? And and going to schools and everything. It brought, I always knew that because I've talked to so many girlfriends of mine that it's like, so many of them have gone through, similar situations as me. And it's like almost everybody, and men too, who don't talk about it. It's happening to the men too. So it did bring my awareness to how bad the laws are. And I know, of course, in the film Finding Nichole, the laws are not in place for her to be protected the way she should have been. And Nicole Beverly has worked tirelessly to get these laws changed or make new laws to protect the victims and allow the survivors of this type of abuse to be able to go on with their lives without fear of retribution or, revenge or whatever. So yeah, it just opened my eyes as to what's happening as far as the laws that haven't been in place, the laws that have now are in place, and just all the hard work for years that Nicole Beverly has been doing to bring about change. And the fact that Harley and Nicole Beverly teamed up to create this film. It was a wonderful script also by Jeffrey Calhoun, right? And that, of course,
who also was a kid who grew up in domestic violence, and I did not even know that.
There you go.
How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do want to say, when we were talking about empathy before, empaths, I know Harley's an empath as well. And Harley's, very in touch with his feelings. And I think he would have had to make this film what it is. Oh, because it's such a healing film. And if Harley had not had that personal experience, I think that brought an extra something to the film, reality to the film, realism to the film, along with Nichole. So it was great teamwork. The Harley, Katie production team, and Nichole and the writer, and of course everybody involved. And I'm just so proud of this film, and I'm very proud to be in it. It's a great film.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and funny enough, with all these things, it is still an entertaining film,
Yeah.
and it is still a hopeful film.
Absolutely.
That's the stuff that I think sometimes we get lost in the, and some people are like, oh, I don't know if I can watch that. It's heavy, and it's like, it's not, a cookie cutter film for sure, but at the end of it, you will feel like you want to do something to help, you want to do something to fix, and those films to me are very rare. The films that where you watch it and you go, I gotta do something about this, because that the topic hit me in a way that I feel like I now need, because now I'm aware, what do I do with this? I have to do something.
Absolutely. And that's part of what I was about to ask you, because storytelling can really change policy, change culture, and it can change lives. So how do you think that filmmakers and mental health advocates like those of us at Imperium can continue to drive the conversation forward in partnership?
Oh, Deborah, do you want to go first?
Well, I love films. I love feel-good films, and I love faith-based films and inspirational films. I mean, I have an eclectic taste of films, but and this fits in there with inspirational films and films that show people that they can take their power back when they've lost it. They've lost their power. Oh my God, it took me years to get my power back after finally leaving that person for the final and last time. Took me 4 times of leaving him to make it the final last time. And I was a shell of the person that I once was. It took me years to get back to who I really am. But I've come out it a lot stronger. So now, of course, nothing like that could ever happen again. But as far as filmmaking and storytelling, yes, absolutely. We all watch films that empower us and make us feel that we can be greater. Like if we're in a stage of our life where we're feeling like we're maybe not doing so great, whether it's relationships or just, how we take care of ourselves or whatever it is, these films, lift us up and show us, look what that person went through. If that person went through that, surely I can I can rise up and, move forward and get my power back, take my power back. And this film is all about that. It's all about taking your power back, not being a victim. In the story, at one point, Nichole, puts her foot down and she fights. And you got to fight. You got to fight because, when you're in those relationships, like we've discussed, it sneaks up on you little by little by little. It just sneaks up until you have nothing. You're nothing. You feel like you're nothing. You feel like you have nothing. You feel like you can't ever be the person you once were or want to be. So yes, this storytelling, this film that Harley made, this incredible production team definitely does that.
For me, I think I finally got my voice back on something that I grew up in, and I'm not going to let it go. Nichole breathed this into me, and I'm a carrier now. So, like I said, we're going to go tackle the next film on the same or similar subject. Very, very relevant if you've been watching the Diddy trial. The next one that we're doing takes place in not just the kind of abuse we saw in Finding Nichole. And we're going to tell the story a little bit differently, because when you're looking at Finding Nichole, we wanted to tackle the systems and everything else. And with Killing Jenny, we're going to blur lines. We're going to make you pick. We're going to make you uncomfortable. But we're going to start by drawing you in and bringing you in, just like she was brought in. So we're going to get to be Jenny a little bit as an audience in this film. And we're going to realize that it's not that easy. And when this stuff is coming at you, nobody's expecting that a person that says, I love you every day to harm you. So we go in with this with our guard down and full of hopes and dreams and aspirations. And then they use a lot of that against us. So we want to kind of blur the lines and like the Diddy trial, like, well, he said, she said, and then see where people land when they see it up close. That's what we're doing. But so that's my voice. I hope that the conversation keeps going like this for Finding Nichole and for Killing Jenny, and that we have lots more conversations like this. So I want to be a catalyst of change that way.
Absolutely. I think you're doing incredible work. I definitely will keep up with you because I definitely want to see Killing Jenny and be involved with that as well. And I want to thank both of you, Harley and Debra. Thank you so much for not only having this conversation with me today, but for sharing your stories, your experience. And thank you for your courage, your creativity, and integrity, and really bringing Nichole's story to life. At Imperium Psychiatric Group, we do believe in the power of healing, and Finding Nichole isn't just a film. It's really a call to action for empathy, for justice, and community. And for anyone listening who's been touched by this conversation, please know that you are not alone. There is professional help available. Together, let's keep the conversation going and continue building a world where survivors are seen, survivors are supported and heard. Thank you so much to both of you for having this conversation and joining today. And everyone, go watch Finding Nichole if you already haven't.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. It was fantastic.